What if I told you that some slaves in the American South were white? Or that British gentlemen in India used to hire people to cover themselves in jams to attract mosquitoes? Don't believe me? Well, today, I'm diving into history's forgotten corners, from the one-drop rule to the Uighur Muslim Genocide and the Parsley Massacre. If obscure history is your thing, you've come to the right place. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 historical events that few people know about. 25. The Forgotten Female Samurai. We all know about the legendary samurai warriors of Japan, but did you know that there were women who fought just as fiercely? Known as onabugesha, meaning woman warrior, these skilled fighters were trained from a young age in martial arts like naginata jutsu, using a pole arm, and tanto jutsu, knife fighting. They weren't just wives or mothers, they actively defended their homes, families, and clans on the battlefield. Armed with naginatas, swords, and even bows and arrows, they were as deadly and dedicated to honor as any male samurai. 24. The Dog That Saved Antarctica. Everyone's heard of Balto, the sled dog who helped deliver diphtheria antitoxin to Nome, Alaska. But the real unsung hero of that daring 1925 serum run was Togo, a spirited Siberian husky. Balto might have run the final highly publicized leg, but Togo, led by musher Leonard Sepala, covered a staggering 264 miles round trip, the longest and most perilous part of the journey. He braved blinding blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and treacherous ice, and even saved his team from a near-death experience on Norton Sound. 23. The Massacre of Kalavryta. In December 1943, the beautiful Greek town of Kalavryta turned into a scene of unspeakable horror. In retaliation for a partisan attack, Nazi forces rounded up all the men and boys over the age of 14 and herded them to a nearby field where they were executed with machine guns. Over 600 people died in a matter of hours. The town itself was systematically looted and burned to the ground, and the women and children were left behind to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. 22. The Jellyboys. During the British Raj, golf was a popular pastime for the elite, but the humid Indian climate came with a pesky problem: mosquitoes. The resourceful, or perhaps desperate, Brits devised a unique solution: the Jellyboys. These Indian men were hired to cover themselves head to toe in a sticky jam, becoming living bait to lure mosquitoes away from the golfers. I know, it's absurd, but it was a genuine tactic, and it just proves the length some would go to for a mosquito-free game of golf. 21. Magdalene Laundries. For over 70 years, the Magdalene Laundries were marketed as refuges for fallen women, a euphemism for unwed mothers, victims of abuse, or women the church considered promiscuous. In reality, they were more akin to prisons. Thousands of women and girls, some as young as 9, were locked up behind the laundry's high walls. They were subjected to forced labor, abuse, starvation, and even solitary confinement. In 1993, the atrocities of the Magdalene Laundries came to light after a mass grave containing 155 bodies was discovered at one of the previous homes. The horrific revelation exposed the horrors that had taken place, leading to public outcry, investigations, and eventually a formal apology from the Irish government in 2013. 20. The Genocide of the Uighur People. Imagine a place where your every move is watched, where your culture is being wiped out, and where your very existence is under threat. Sadly, this is the harsh reality for the Uighur people in Xinjiang, China. And it isn't just some new development either. These folks have been facing discrimination for centuries, but things have gotten way worse under the Chinese Communist Party. I'm talking mass surveillance, forced labor, and re-education camps that are anything but educational. There are even reports of forced sterilizations and a potential genocide. Of course, China denies all of it, but the world is watching, and the situation is deeply concerning. 19. The New London School Explosion. In 1937, the small town of New London, Texas was thriving amidst the East Texas oil boom, but on March 18th, tragedy struck. A massive explosion ripped through the recently built New London School, killing and injuring hundreds of students and teachers. The culprit was a silent, invisible killer: odorless natural gas. It had leaked up into the school's basement, building up undetected. When it ignited, the devastating blast tore through the building, leaving it in ruins. The New London School Explosion remains the deadliest school explosion in American history. In response to the tragedy, laws were passed mandating the addition of a foul-smelling odorant to natural gas, a practice that continues to protect lives to this day. 18. The British Gulags in Kenya. World War II may have ended in 1945, but for the people of Kenya, a new kind of conflict was just beginning. The British decided to create a network of detention camps across Kenya and imprison nearly 1.5 million Kikuyu people. In these gulags, the Kikuyu were subjected to forced labor, torture, starvation, and disease. The conditions were so horrific that thousands, some say hundreds of thousands, died. 17. The 1888 Schoolhouse Blizzard. The Great Plains of the US are notorious for their brutal winters, but the blizzard of January 12, 1888 was one of the deadliest. On that day, the morning was unusually warm, and the children went to school without their usual winter attire. By early afternoon, the temperatures plummeted, and a blinding snowstorm swept across the landscape. The severe gusts and thick snow rapidly disoriented everyone caught outside, including several children on their way home from school. The blizzard killed 235 people, many of whom were young students who died from exposure. 16. The sad case of Benga. Can you imagine what it would feel like to be ripped from your home, shipped across the ocean, and put on display at a zoo? That was the horrifying reality for Benga, a young Mbuti man from the Congo. In 1906, he was exhibited in the Bronx Zoo's monkey house, labeled as a savage and the missing link between humans and apes. The shocking display sparked public outrage, eventually leading to protests and Benga's release. But the damage was done. Despite attempts to civilize him, the trauma of his experience remained, and Benga took his own life in 1916. 15. The Vipeholm Experiment. What if I told you a government-sponsored experiment intentionally gave people cavities? That sounds like a dentist's worst nightmare, right? Well, in the 40s and 50s, that's exactly what happened at Vipeholm Hospital in Sweden. In a misguided attempt to understand tooth decay, researchers fed hundreds of mentally disabled patients sugary diets, including massive amounts of sticky toffee. The results were unsurprising. Lots of cavities. But at what cost? The Vipeholm experiment has since been condemned for its unethical treatment of vulnerable individuals and its disregard for their well-being. 14. The ideal maternity home. The next item on today's list is both heartbreaking and infuriating. Back in the 30s and 40s, the ideal maternity home in Nova Scotia, Canada, marketed itself as a place for unwed mothers to find support and care. But they found everything but. Their home was run by a couple named William and Leila Young, who ran a twisted baby selling ring. They'd take healthy babies from their mothers and sell them to wealthy couples in the US who couldn't have children of their own. And the babies who weren't perfect, they were often neglected, left to suffer from illness or malnourishment, and many didn't survive. After their deaths, they were disposed of in butter boxes, and the scandal became known as the Butterbox Babies Scandal. 13. The Khuk, or the chicken poop prison. In the seaside town of Lam Sing, Thailand, there's a tiny red brick tower called Khuk, which translates to, get this, chicken poop prison. Built by the French during their occupation in 1893, legend has it that the prisoners were locked on the ground floor directly below a chicken coop. With cleverly placed holes in the floor, chicken droppings would rain down on the inmates day and night, creating a genuinely horrific form of torture. Shockingly, Khuk isn't the only instance of chicken poop being weaponized. In 2013, city officials in Canada tried to disperse a homeless encampment by dumping a truckload of the stuff on it. The attempt was unsuccessful and widely condemned as cruel and inhumane. 12. Croatia's Ustašes. World War II exposed the world to the horrors of the Holocaust and Nazi concentration camps. But lesser known are the atrocities committed by other regimes during that dark period. In the independent state of Croatia, a puppet state of Nazi Germany, the ruling Ustaša movement unleashed a reign of terror rivaling the Nazis' own brutality. They systematically targeted Serbs, Jews, Roma, and political dissidents, establishing their own network of concentration camps where hundreds of thousands were systematically tortured and murdered. 11. MV Wilhelm Gustloff. In World War II's final frigid months, the Baltic Sea witnessed a maritime disaster even greater than the Titanic. The German ship MV Wilhelm Gustloff, packed with over 10,000 refugees and wounded soldiers desperate to escape the advancing Red Army, was torpedoed by a Soviet submarine. Chaos erupted as the ship sank, and with not enough lifeboats and freezing temperatures, thousands were doomed. Approximately 9,000 people died that night, making it the deadliest maritime disaster in history. 10. The Parsley Massacre. Have you ever heard of the Parsley Massacre? In 1937, the Dominican Republic, under the iron fist of dictator Rafael Trujillo, was gripped by a brutal campaign to eliminate the Haitian population residing within its borders. To identify their targets, Trujillo's soldiers devised a simple test. They would ask people to pronounce the word perejil, parsley. Due to linguistic differences, Haitian Creole speakers often struggled to roll their R's, a common feature of Spanish pronunciation. This seemingly trivial difference became a matter of life or death. If you couldn't roll your R's when asked to say parsley, you were likely Haitian and doomed. The event became known as the Parsley Massacre and resulted in the slaughter of thousands, perhaps as many as 30,000 Haitian men, women, and children. 9. The St. Pierre snake invasion. In 1902, the volcanic island of Martinique was home to a bustling city called St. Pierre, known as the Paris of the Caribbean. But on May 8th, tragedy struck when Mount Pelée erupted. Nearly 30,000 people died. However, the eruption wasn't the only threat the inhabitants faced. In the days preceding the eruption, the island experienced escalating volcanic activity, and reports circulated of unusual phenomena, including an influx of venomous snakes such as the deadly fer de lance, venturing into the city of St. Pierre. Whether a result of the volcanic disturbances or simply an unfortunate coincidence, the exact death toll from the resulting snake bites is unfortunately unknown. 8. The Halifax Explosion. In 1917, the bustling port city of Halifax, Nova Scotia was rocked by a catastrophic explosion that changed its landscape forever. It all began with a seemingly minor collision between two ships in the harbor, the French vessel Mont Blanc, laden with a massive cargo of high explosives, and the Belgian relief ship Emo. The impact ignited the Mont Blanc's volatile cargo, triggering a devastating explosion that instantly leveled a massive portion of the city. 2,000 people died, and thousands more were injured and left homeless. The resulting tsunami surged up to 18 meters or 60 feet high and swept away homes, buildings, and people, leaving the city in ruins. 7. The dark side of the Jameson legacy. You might be familiar with Jameson Irish whiskey, a beloved drink around the world, but did you know that one of the heirs to that fortune, James S. Jameson, had a monstrous secret? In the late 1800s, Jameson traveled to the Congo, then under Belgian colonial rule. Accounts claim that he paid for and witnessed the horrific act of a young girl being killed and cannibalized by members of a tribe. Although many debate his exact involvement in the event, Jameson's diary entries recount its gruesome details and reveal a disturbing side to a man whose name is now synonymous with celebration and good times. 6. The 1607 Bristol Channel Tsunami. Imagine waking up one morning in 1607 and going about your daily life in a coastal town along the Bristol Channel. Suddenly, without warning, a monstrous wave slams into the shore, swallowing everything in its path. This terrifying event, now known as the 1607 Bristol Channel Flood, claimed an estimated 2,000 lives and wiped out entire villages. For centuries, the cause of this disaster remained a mystery, but recent research has unearthed a far more intriguing possibility: a tsunami. The evidence is compelling. Eyewitness accounts from the time describe a sudden and towering water wall consistent with a tsunami's destructive power, and geological studies have confirmed that similar events happened in the region in the distant past. 5. The other emancipated slaves. In 1864, Harper's Weekly magazine published a shocking image: a group of emancipated slaves, and some of them were white. This photo exposed the one-drop rule. It essentially meant that anyone with even a trace of African ancestry was legally considered black, regardless of their skin color. So even if someone looked white, if they had a black ancestor somewhere in their family tree, they could be enslaved. 4. The Chinese Exclusion Act. When I call the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 a landmark law, it's not a compliment. The law was the first of its kind in the United States, banning immigration solely because of someone's nationality. It specifically targeted Chinese laborers due to concerns about job competition and widespread racial prejudice, especially in the West. The effects on Chinese communities were devastating. Families were torn apart and exposed to economic hardship and across-the-board discrimination. 3. The first Social Security numbers. Believe it or not, we don't actually know who got the first Social Security number, or even the exact date it was issued. The best guess is that one of the first was issued sometime in mid-November 1963. What we do know is that hundreds of thousands of cards were likely issued on that first day alone, so it was a major milestone in American history. 2. The actual first face on the $1 bill. Have you ever wondered whose face was on the very first dollar bill? Spoiler alert, wasn't George Washington. You'd actually see a portrait of Salmon P. Chase, the bigwig Secretary of the Treasury during the Civil War in 1862. Chase was a very important man at the time and played a big role in financing the war effort and setting up our national banking system. However, by 1869, Washington finally took his place on the $1 bill, where he has remained to this day. 1. Richard Nixon plotted to assassinate a journalist. Have you ever heard of a little something called Watergate? Well, that infamous scandal brought down the 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon. And if you thought that was the worst of it, you're in for a surprise. Documents declassified in the late 90s and early 2000s revealed a plot straight out of a spy thriller. It came out that Nixon, obsessed with leaks and controlling his image, was involved in a plan to murder an investigative journalist named Jack Anderson. The plan involved poisoning Anderson's medicine cabinet and even dosing him with LSD. While these plans were never actually carried out, likely derailed by the Watergate investigation itself, it's shown another dark side of Nixon that we rarely discuss and continues to remind us of the potential for power to corrupt even the highest office. So, what other historical events do few people know about? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and check out our social medias, including my personal ones, links in that description. And if you like this list, you need to check out 25 dark historical facts kept out of the classroom, right here. Because school's awesome, but it doesn't always teach us everything. So, click here. Check it out.